Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked on Wolves. Game 4 of the Summer League is in the books, and the Timberwolves made number 3 overall pick Reed Sheppard work in this game. The biggest challenge Reed Sheppard has faced so far. We'll break down what the Wolves did to slow him down. It's all upcoming. Welcome in. You are Locked on Wolves.
You are Locked on Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked on Wolves podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked on Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sportsing like they want them to, and there's no playoffs to be found right now. We're almost at the WNBA All-Star break. Baseball kicks back off this weekend. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend. The Timberwolves, I guess not really round robin, but quote unquote regular schedule of the Las Vegas Summer League is in the books now. They've gone 3-1, beating the Houston Rockets on Thursday night. Today, we're going to talk all about that game. The most impressive thing to me is what the Wolves did against Reed Sheppard, the best offensive player drafted early, the number 3 overall pick, of course, in this year's draft for Houston. He's been really good in Summer League. The Wolves did an outstanding job of limiting him, and it was really a team effort. But a couple of players I want to highlight specifically that played extremely well in this game. So we'll get to all that here next. A big thank you, first of all, for making Locked on Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked on Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked on Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. All right. So the Timberwolves were coming off of their only loss in Summer League so far. And Houston also 2-1 coming into this game. Reed Sheppard has been one of the best players of Summer League, obviously one of the most highly anticipated players to watch during Summer League. And the Timberwolves knew that, obviously, coming in. They were going to be up for the challenge, and that is what stood out the most in this game. How are the Wolves going to be able to slow down Reed Sheppard? Was it going to be a lot of Jalen Clark? Was it going to be, just asking Daishen Nix to do it? As it turns out, it was a lot of Daishen Nix, and he was fantastic in this game. Not treating this show today as much as a traditional regular season post-game pod. We're going to do kind of what we've done during the week, which is almost go player by player and talk about individual performances. But we have to start with what they limited Reed Sheppard to. And yeah, Sheppard got 20 points, but it took him 17 shots to do it. And he turned the basketball over 9 times in this game. The Wolves forced Reed Sheppard into 9 turnovers in just 9 of 17 shooting. So 20 points on 17 shooting, 17 shots, 9 turnovers, and 0 of 5 outside the arc. That is a good defensive game against the opposing team's best offensive player. And ton of credit to Daishen Nix. And I need to eat a little bit of crow here. Coming into Summer League, I was a bit down on the Wolves bringing Daishen Nix back on a 2-way deal. I wasn't 100% surprised by it based on his presence on the bench last year for Minnesota. We know, of course, leading the bench mob, as it were, with the pointing and the whole thing and the locker room presence for Daishen Nix. But I was, going back a year, almost a year ago, when they brought Daishen Nix in the first place and signed him to a 2-way. I wasn't really sure what the motivation there was, because he's a high volume, relatively inefficient scorer, obviously a big bodied guard, but not a great defender naturally, or to that point, really, after a couple of years in Houston, not a consistent enough shooter either. And, what were the Wolves looking for? What's Daishen Nix's role ever going to be with Minnesota? It's never going to be, hey, we need you to go get us 20, given where he is on the depth chart and the players that are on the Wolves roster. But so I thought bringing him back out of 2-way was simply for vibes. Now, to be clear, Daishen Nix isn't going to be a rotation player for the Wolves this year. But, part of this was last season. I've said this, leading into the Summer League this year. Daishen Nix played exactly 1 game last year with rotation minutes. One of his NBA appearances was non-garbage time, and that was when they were down to like 9 guys in that game in Utah in March when everybody was hurt. Rudy got hurt on the road trip, and Cat was out, and the whole thing. And Daishen Nix played. Mike Conley was out and played fairly well in limited rotation minutes. But in my mind, it was like, if they aren't going to trust this dude to play rotation minutes any other time they're shorthanded, any other time Mike Conley sat out, why bring him back? Well, clearly they still think there's some development to be had there. And I've been really impressed with him in Summer League. And Summer League is Summer League. I get it. The caveat applies to this whole week of shows, 2 weeks of shows we're doing here, that you can only tell so much from summer league. There's been plenty of good players that haven't played well in summer league, and we'll talk about Rob Dillingham later. He hasn't played all that well overall. He certainly hasn't shot the ball well, but we have to give credit where credit's due and acknowledge when somebody's grown in certain areas. And Daishen Nix defensively has been extremely impressive in Las Vegas, and he pretty much shut down Reed Sheppard, especially early in this game. I think Sheppard got an and one on him late in the second quarter where he drove to the basket, beat him off the dribble. That's the only time I can think of when Daishen Nix was his primary defender, when he actually, I think there might have been one tough mid-range shot he hit over Nix. But by and large, I mean, Daishen Nix shut him down. He picked his pocket once. Also, Josh Minott picked his pocket on a switch. Again, forcing the 9 turnovers is huge, but every shot that Reed Sheppard took was contested. Nix was in his jersey the whole time. Now, certainly it helps in summer league. You don't foul out with 6 fouls. You foul out with 10 personal fouls. Daishen Nix did commit 6 fouls in 31 minutes, and a lot of those were guarding Reed Sheppard. But by and large, the job he did, the physicality he played with, this was almost like I know it's summer league, but a welcome to the NBA type moment for Reed Sheppard, playing against guys who were on the roster and present in practice and being coached by the coaching staff of last year's dominant number 1 defensive team. I know these guys, none of these guys were in the rotation for last year's Timberwolves team, but Josh Minott, Daishen Nix, Jalen Clark, even though he wasn't on the floor, Leonard Miller, those guys were all in practice on the bench when the Timberwolves were shutting teams down throughout the season last year. And Daishen Nix got a front row seat to that. And he even said as much about a week ago toward the beginning of summer league in an interview. He said, look, I picked up all this stuff watching Ant and Nikhil and Jaden and these guys guard on the perimeter. I want to guard like them. And it's clearly rubbed off on Daishen Nix in the way that he plays. This was not his identity previously. Go back and watch him at Houston. Go back and watch him at G League Ignite. And this dude was going 100% defensively and legit shut down Reed Sheppard, who's arguably the best offensive player, certainly offensive rookie in NBA Summer League. And again, he was in his jersey the whole time. Josh Minott on a switch picked his pocket once. We saw Jalen Clark get a turn when Nix wasn't in the game. And Jalen Clark didn't play as much in Summer League game number 3. But this was the defense we saw in games 1 and 2 and for brief stretches in 3 from Jalen Clark, too. Jalen Clark was awesome. He committed 3 fouls in 22 minutes, which that's not a bad rate. 1 steal, 1 block defensively for Jalen Clark. Daishen Nix had those 2 steals and also just jumping passing lanes for everybody else. It starts with the ball pressure, with Nix being up on Reed Sheppard, but the other guys also crowding the lane, playing the passing lanes the way that they need to make Reed Sheppard's life difficult and force the ball not only out of his hands, but just make him uncomfortable, make him make a difficult pass. And that's exactly what the Timberwolves did. Very impressive defensive game plan for the Wolves. I'm going to give the majority of that credit to Daishen Nix, the way the Wolves actually stopped him. But solid work from Minott, from Leonard Miller defensively, helping guard the paint. Miller, by the way, had 5 steals in this game. We'll talk more about him. And then also Jalen Clark off the bench. Really good plan for Minnesota to slow down Reed Sheppard. All right. I want to get into a couple other individual players. I would argue, in addition to Nix, Leonard Miller was probably the best player on the floor, period, in this game. Otherwise, we'll talk about Josh Minott. We'll talk about Jesse Edwards and then a couple other key takeaways here from this one. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Lockdown Wolves is brought to us by our friends at FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But now that the playoffs are over, we're really only in baseball and WNBA season. That's it. We get fewer games this time of year, and the sports aren't sportsing like we want them to. But FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up customers with a boost or a bonus daily. And it's all customers, too. You don't have to be a new customer. It's all customers. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Baseball kicks back off tonight throughout the weekend. WNBA is ongoing almost to the All-Star break. And then we'll get into football. Like training camp starts here this week for some teams. So we have preseason football in like 2 weeks. It's happening quickly. Again, FanDuel's hooking up all customers. You don't have to be a new customer with a boost or a bonus daily. Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Do you watch Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day long? If so, no doubt you're tired of all of the shouting and you have to turn the volume down. Instead, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right. So overall, in this game, the Timberwolves played significantly better than they did in game 3, and this was a lot more like how they played in the first 2 games, and there were several guys who stepped up. And similar to every game to this point, it was not one, impressive, dominant offensive performance by anybody. I know Leonard Miller had 21 points, but it was more the activity level from him that was most impressive. And again, he was the best player on the floor for Minnesota. It was either him or Nix. I would probably actually argue for Miller because of everything he did offensively and on the glass activity-wise. But this was still a poor shooting game for Minnesota. They were under 26% from outside the arc. They were 64% from the line. They ended up just 40% from the field. And actually, those numbers are in line or worse than what Houston did. It was just they played faster. They got more opportunities. They had 5 more steals in this game. They turned it over 10 less times. And I credit the Wolves' ball pressure and their defense to give them those extra opportunities, the fast break points, and generate those 24 turnovers. This was a lot of live ball. This wasn't just travels. This was live ball turnovers from the backcourt of Houston. Again, Reed Sheppard with the 9, but they had a couple other guys that had multiple turnovers as well in that backcourt. And Leonard Miller was, again, the help defense. Like I mentioned in the first segment, that was a huge part of what he did in this game. He finished with 21 points on 17 shots, 11 rebounds, 5 steals, 5 assists for Leonard Miller. 5 offensive rebounds. Now, a couple of those were him playing volleyball, missing. He actually got blocked by the rim a couple of times in this game, got his own rebound, and then got a putback. But again, activity level, length, athleticism. He's not the biggest dude, and he's playing center in Summer League. And there have been moments where he's looked a little bit overwhelmed with the size and the physicality that he's dealing with. We talked about that when he struggled earlier in Summer League. But this game, 21, 11, 5, and 5, 3 turnovers in 31 minutes. That's a solid line for Leonard Miller. And I was impressed with both ends of the floor. Actually, a little bit of perimeter defense as well. He had a couple of nice passes of those 5 assists. He also finished a couple of really nice assists early in the game from Rob Dillingham. There were 2, I think, where Rob Dillingham made just fantastic finds for Leonard Miller in the paint, and Miller got a layup or a dunk. Well-rounded performance from Leonard Miller, and I was super encouraged. He's had moments so far in Summer League, but I had wanted to see more, and this game is exactly what we were all expecting to see. And hopefully in the final game for the Wolves in summer, we get to see something similar from Leonard Miller. As Summer League winds down here, the Wolves have just the 1 game left on the schedule. We're going to need to see that exact same type of performance from Leonard Miller for the Wolves to feel good about how he put a bow on Summer League. Josh Minott also activity level in this game, and that's the easiest way to describe it. Minott 15 points. He had just 4 rebounds. It felt like a lot more. Again, he was really active. He also knocked out a couple of threes late in this game, and he struggled shooting the 3 in Summer League. It's one of the things that we were looking to see more of. Can he knock down threes to be that rotation guy, to earn a 10th spot in the rotation, which, by the way, Micah Nori was on the broadcast. I think it was, I forget who actually broadcast the game, but he was with the broadcast team and talked about exactly that, looking for guys to battle for the 9th, 10 spots in the rotation. He was specifically talking about Terrence Shannon Jr., who didn't play very much in this game, but Minott gave himself an opportunity this summer so far, with how well he's played overall, with the job he's done on the glass. He also pitched in 3 steals in this game. The Wolves had 13 steals. 3 were Josh Minott, 5 were Leonard Miller. Passing lanes, passing lanes, passing lanes. Now, Minott, one of his was picking the pocket of Reed Sheppard, and he was out on the perimeter quite a bit in this game too. But his ability to rack up stocks, that's going to be Josh Minott's calling card if he's going to earn a rotation spot in the NBA. Is he getting block shots? Is he getting steals? Is he being active on the glass? And again, you'd like to see more than 4 rebounds in 30 minutes, but everything else was good from Josh Minott. And knocking down those threes, like I don't think anyone's going to expect him to shoot 2 of 5 on 3-point attempts. Any given night if he sees rotation minutes this year, but he has to be close to that. He has to be able to keep the defense honest, where teams actually have to close out to him on the perimeter. And if he plays like he did in this game with consistency, then I mean that's what they need him to do. They need him to show that he's able to space the floor, and then give you all that other stuff activity wise at the rim, on the glass, defensively. That's going to be number one for him, and he did that in this game. All right, Rob Dillingham. So Rob Dillingham has just not shot the ball well so far in summer league, and there's no way around that. Now, to this point, I think two of the three games the Wolves had played to this point, I thought he actually played really well overall. Game 3 was a struggle all the way around. This one was somewhere in the middle. Clearly, he's as a scorer, and the Wolves probably gave him this directive too. He's trying to shoot his way out of this slump. He was 15 points on 21 shots in this game, but the shots he made are exactly the type of shots he was making at Kentucky. And I don't think he was too far outside of what the Wolves want him to do offensively. And I didn't really have a huge problem with his shot selection in this game. He just missed a lot of layups again. So a couple of the threes were maybe forced, but he also hit one really natural looking catch and shoot three, which he's going to have to do to play off the ball next to Anthony Edwards at times. And at his size, he's going to have to be able to make deep threes wide open. And he had one catch and shoot three that was probably 5 feet outside the arc in this game. He also had one really tough leaner trying to draw contact that went in, maybe a bit ill-advised, but it worked out. But he missed some more layups. There were a couple times where he missed an open layup, got his own rebound, and then missed a contested layup. And that's your 21 shot attempts there. It happened very quickly. 6 assists in this game, 5 rebounds, 3 turnovers. You can handle the 6 assist to 3 turnover ratio in summer league. That's not awful. So 15, 6 and 5, 6 of 21 shooting, 2 of 7 outside the arc, just 1 of 4 at the line. So it just continues to be the shooting. Again, the feel, the effort level, the intensity defensively, I think has been good. And clearly that's something that he knows he has to bring to the table in the NBA. He has to be a tenacious defender. He has to be up on guys and play hard and fight through screens, because at his size and the type of players he's going to be, he's going to have to be able to guard at the NBA level. That's going to be how he sticks on the floor. If he can't defend at all, if he's not fighting through screens, Chris Finch is not going to play him. He's going to be playing Nickeil Alexander-Walker as kind of the de facto backup point guard if he has to, if Dillingham struggles defensively. So Rob knows what he has to do, and I think that's been there in summer league. I'm not going to wring my hands too much about the shooting percentage in summer league for Rob Dillingham, because it just hasn't been there for him. But it's not a massive, it's 4 games, grand scheme of things. It just happens to be his first 4 games in an NBA jersey, even though it's just summer league. Overall, so far after that game, now he's played 4. I lost it here. He's played 4 games in summer league. I was trying to look for his actual overall shooting percentage, but here we go. I think I have it here. 28% in Vegas to this point. It's not great. It's not. That's not a great shooting percentage for a lead guard. But again, the process is there. The process is okay. The process is fine. It's the execution and the actual making of the shots, which he did with consistency at Kentucky. So it's not something I'm going to harp on too much. And he clearly is not shy to continue pulling the trigger. And he's also doing a pretty good job shot selection wise of still getting his teammates involved. Still 6 assists in this game in 31 minutes. And I thought was a positive presence on the floor, just missing shots. And that happens. Take any 4-game stretch from any player at any point last season, and you can find a stretch where they didn't shoot the ball well. Everything still looks right. Everything still looks right for Rob Dillingham. It's not a massive concern here moving forward. All right, I want to talk about a few guys off the bench mostly. We'll talk about Terrence Shannon. He didn't play very much in this game. I don't really know why. Nadir Haifi was out. Remember, he left game 3 to attend to a family emergency, and he's no longer at Summer League for the Wolves. So he did not play in this game. And we got to see a little bit from some other guys too. So we'll take a look at that. We'll put a bow on this one here next. All right, so we talked about Daishen Nix. We talked about Leonard Miller, both having really good games. Josh Minott, Dillingham shooting woes in this one. TJ Shannon only played 7 minutes in this game and didn't commit any fouls, didn't appear to be an injury unless I missed something. He only played 7 minutes, and he was pretty quiet last game too. I wouldn't be totally concerned about it. Again, Summer League, and he played extremely well in the first couple of games, but notable that he only played 7 minutes of this one, and with no Nadir Haifi. Now, Jalen Clark, you get to play 22 minutes. He only played, I don't know, 10 or 11 last game after being outstanding in the second game of Summer League. Again, didn't shoot the ball well. But as we said before Summer League, that wasn't going to be alarming. It would have been gravy if he'd shot it well, and really encouraging for what happens next for Jalen Clark and the possibility of him cracking the Timberwolves rotation, because he is an all defense all the time player. But he's actually looked okay offensively overall. And in this game, there were a couple instances of pump fake and drive where, again, the process, similar to Dillingham, the process looked good, which is the thing you're paying the most attention to in Vegas is the process leading into the shot attempt. Does that look good? Is the decision-making sound? And for the most part, it is for Jalen Clark. He's going to have to be able to knock down a three-point shot at something resembling, he's not going to be a league average three-point shooter, at least not this year, but he's got to make 1 in 3. Like, that's going to have to be his goal if he's going to stick in a rotation this year. He was just 1 of 6 on three-point attempts in this game, 1 of 8 overall from the field, got to the line once, was 1 of 2 there. So 4 points on 8 shots, 2 assists, a steal and a block, and really good defense when he had the opportunity to guard Reed Sheppard. I mean, like, there's no two ways about it. Jalen Clark is an NBA top flight point of attack defender right now, coming off of Achilles surgery, having never played a second in an NBA game, having not played live basketball in an NBA jersey at all because of the Achilles injury last year. He could step in right now and guard anybody on the perimeter. And that's going to give him a shot at a rotation spot. And if anybody misses time this season, if Nickeil Alexander-Walker misses time, Jalen Clark's the dude. He's going to step up and be a point of attack defender for Chris Finch off the bench for the Wolves this year, because he's already that good defensively. He's not quite as big as Nickeil lengthwise, but he's not far off. And again, the technique he plays with, the tenacity he plays with, and he didn't show it in this game, just 1 rebound in 22 minutes, and it was an offensive rebound. He's a really good rebounder too. He rebounded his position extremely well at UCLA. And for a team that struggles at times with defensive rebounding, weirdly enough, with one of the best in the league with Rudy Gobert, but their guards haven't rebounded the ball all that well historically. They improved a little last year, but to have a guy who you can count on to grab you some boards from the 2-guard spot is really, it's really a luxury to have. And Jalen Clark should be able to provide that luxury for the Wolves, and he gets an opportunity this year. So another solid game for Jalen Clark. And I think he's made a case. I've said this before. It's probably TJ Shannon that leads the way in the battle for the 10th man spot, but Josh Minott's making a case. Jalen Clark, depending on matchups, is making a case. And in this game, you have to look at Leonard Miller. Now, I think the Wolves give Leonard Miller extended run in the G League next year and say, hey, man, show us what you learned. Like, we know you dominated the G League to an extent a couple years ago with the Ignite, and he played decently well last year when he was sent down to Iowa. But if he can dominate there for extended stretches of time and show not just that he can score, not just that, he can do X, Y, Z, but do the little things that role players are going to have to do in the NBA. And that's one of the things Summer League is for, is can Josh Minott knock down an open 3? Can Leonard Miller consistently rebound and defend? Can Jalen Clark do anything offensively? Can these guys develop these other skills to add to what their role will be in the NBA? They're not all going to have the ball in their hands as much as they do in Summer League. Can they do enough here to show that they can fill a role when the team needs them? Jesse Edwards had what I think was probably his best game. Of course, Jesse Edwards, the two-way signee for the Wolves, big man, was pretty quiet last game. But after the first couple of games, I had said on the show that I thought the most impressive thing with him is defensive positioning and verticality, knowing where to be and knowing how to defend without fouling for the most part. And in this game, he did a really good job of defending without fouling. Only 2 fouls in 18 minutes, which is a really good rate for him compared to what we'd seen previously. And also for a big trying to play at this speed for the first time. Like, this is a lot faster than what he was facing at Syracuse and West Virginia. And to be in the right place at the right time and not commit a personal foul is really impressive. He had 10 rebounds, 5 on the offensive glass, 5 on the defensive glass, 3 of 6. So good to see the touch around the rim a little bit. To me, it looks like he has pretty good hands to this point. And I think if he can provide, I use this phrase, I can't remember who I was talking about on the basketball part of the other day, but Jesse Edwards is a reasonable facsimile for Rudy Gobert for the Wolves if Rudy misses time at any point. But he's the only other big on the roster that has that similar skill set to Rudy. Now, he's not Rudy. I shouldn't have to say that. He's not Rudy Gobert, but he's a different type of big than Cat. He's a different type of big than Luka Garza. He's obviously a different type of big than Naz Reid, than Leonard Miller, than Josh Minott, or anybody that's going to play the 4 or the 5 this year. he's just a different type of player. He's more like Rudy. He's a screener. He's going to dive to the basket a bunch, and he did that really well. He's a rebounder. He's a rim protector. He did have a block in this game too. I've been really impressed with Jesse Edwards, and this I thought was his best game. I think he made the case for like, hey, if Rudy misses some time, yeah, you might want to start Kat and Naz, and give Luka Garza some run. But if you need a defensive big out there, somebody with maybe certainly more rim protection ability than Luka Garza, similar rebounding capabilities, but a little bit more size, then Jesse Edwards is your guy. Like, he could play some bench minutes for you, and I think look the part. I think do enough to be solid in those bench minutes. So really good performance from Jesse Edwards. And again, it's the defensive, like the rebounds are nice, and that's what's going to pop. If you look at the stat sheet, like, oh man, 8 and 10 in 18 minutes. That's great. Only committed 2 fouls. But if you watch him defensively, he has this understanding of verticality that it felt like took Karl-Anthony Towns 4 years to learn, of getting to the right spot, staying straight up and down, not committing a foul, not leaning into the defender's space, not, fouling with your body, not, kind of faux putting your arms in the air, but actually leaning them forward and creating a foul that way. All that stuff, Jesse Edwards is very impressive at. Now, I know he played 5 years in college, and that's a big reason for that. But to adjust to the NBA level, or to the speed of the NBA level, we'll see if he can do that, once we get into preseason and regular season, if he gets the opportunity. But you play the games that are in front of you, and right now that's Summer League, and I think he's done an extremely good job with that here to this point. All right, only one other player to play double-digit minutes in this game for the Wolves was Gabe Kalscheur, who had not played to this point in Summer League. Of course, Kalscheur started his college career with the Golden Gophers, University of Minnesota, and then finished with a couple years at Iowa State. Was with the Owls of the G League for part of the season last year, and I thought looked the part is probably the best way to say it. I think he's a little undersized and not a good enough of a shooter for his size to stick at the NBA level. And we talked about this when he was added to the roster a week and a half ago or so. He's a good defender, but at his size, he has to either be a great defender or a great shooter. And he's neither. He's a good defender, and he's been a below average shooter. And actually at Iowa State, he wasn't as good of a shooter as he was supposed to be early in his Gophers career. He did hit the buzzer beater right before halftime on a really nice pass ahead by, I can't remember who passed it. It was either Dillingham or Shannon, I think. But it was a really good shot from Kalscheur at the end of the first half, but ended up being, that was one of 2 buckets. He also hit a mid-range jumper in the second half. So he had 5 points on 2 of 4, 1 of 2 outside the arc, 1 assist, 1 steal, 1 rebound in 12 minutes. So I thought he was fine. Like, I thought he played well. He's a kind of your classic G League player. I don't know that he'll ever get the opportunity at the NBA level, but looked fine in this game. Joe Wieskamp, kind of the same thing that we've seen from him. He got a 3-point play again, which he did last game, missed his only 3-point attempt, which he did last game. Jaden Ledee, pretty underwhelmed by him. Unfortunately, he was so good at San Diego State. I was excited to see him play. He hasn't played all that much. I think he's played single digit minutes in every game, but hasn't really popped at all with what he's done. So not a whole lot to say there either. All right. The Wolves have one more game left this summer, and I'm recording this not long after the game finished. And I can't find when they actually play next, but I think it's going to be Saturday or Sunday, and I think it's just one more game. They're not going to be in the playoff bracket, if you will, for Summer League, just because they went 3-1. There's going to be teams that went 4-0, and also teams with better point differentials. The Wolves won all 3 of their games by like between 8 and 10 points, and their one loss, I guess, was a 2-point loss, but they're not going to be in the playoff bracket for this, but they will get one more game this weekend. So we'll talk about that on Monday's show. And then we'll also spend a couple days next week putting a bow on Summer League overall. We'll talk about our biggest takeaways, positive and negative, from Summer League, what any of this might mean for the Timberwolves final roster and also rotation for next year. So there's a lot to get to here, because as we said at the start of Summer League, like, there's actually legitimate players that are from the Wolves standard roster on standard roster contracts and 2 first-round picks. Like, there's a lot of actual takeaways from Summer League. Last year, it was just kind of a shrug, and, this happened, and these guys, there's a couple guys that might make the training camp roster, but there's 6 guys that played in this game, 7 guys that played in this game that are going to have some impact on the standard roster this year for the Wolves, and be players that we see come through Minneapolis this year for Minnesota. So we'll talk about all that next week. So a lot to get to there. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also watch on YouTube, and of course, the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder that we're still daily through the month of July, so make sure you follow and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Of course, we'll be back on Monday putting a bow on Summer League. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.